Sorry about my clock.
All right, let me verify that we do have the pictures of our presenters in front of us.
Yes, we do, Paul. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, extended family. It has been a delight for me to feel like an extended family on this forum over the years. And periodically, I get to meet people. I was in Nauvoo over the last couple of days on the Untold Stories and had the privilege of having dinner with four ladies from Burlington, the ones that planted 10,000 flowers to share with people in Burlington and Mount Pleasant, and most of them in Nauvoo, many around the mansion house, many on the campgrounds. And the fact that those four ladies had been digging with me for 10 years, and I had escorted them to the pageant, and I was sitting there with them when the newspaper lady came by. The newspaper lady complimented me on my beautiful daughters. And so I've adopted Mary and Rebecca and Rebecca and Rebecca to be part of my extended family. And it's gratifying because I sort of add you guys to my extended family as well, because it is a regular meeting here where we love each other, appreciate each other. Sometimes we disagree and can share that agreeably, and sometimes not quite so agreeably. But I really appreciate the fact that you've been coming back. Many of you have been coming back for now 4 years to gather the information that's being shared by these erudite presenters. Our sequence this evening will be not quite the same as the sequence that we had in presentation, because we have a couple of presenters that have asked to go late. And so we'll proceed with the sequence that I have on the next slide. Well, you'll see that we have David Ferriman on the left, and then Blair Bryant on the role of belief in the plan of salvation will not be here. We have, let me go down to Bill Shepard. Will be presenting on his the conflict between Mormons and their neighbors. Ron Smith, I haven't seen yet, but I anticipate he'll be with us. Newell is with us, and I didn't see Stubbs yet, but perhaps. And then who else am I missing? Let me go to the next slide and I'll pick that up. Yeah, we have Bill Shepard would be first. Ron would be second if he follows. David would be third if that works. Newell Wright on the Trail of Jesus. Brian Stubbs, Merle Hillson, James Loumiet. Blair Bryant probably will not be showing, so we'll have just the quick review of the role of belief in the plan of salvation. And so that's the sequence we'll proceed with, if that's agreeable. And let me then begin with a prayer. Loving Creator, whose eternal ideas we glimpse as the seasons pass, as ice turns to fluid and then to gas, and our generations seek to renew. We bow and attempt to humble ourselves before you as we seek your thinking for us in this forum review. For remarkable, diverse ideas of relationships have been presented, and we have consented to treat each with respect, seeking within your will. And we recognize our need to hear you, to hear your voice in the thunder, in the breeze, in our souls, beckoning us to be still. And in a world in which our flags are furled, where war and conflict tend to prevail, we would here tonight our faith unite in prayer that we find and embrace the significant theme and detail to help us move along the lifeline groove, reaching beyond the ruts of our past, that our reach exceed the immediate need to acknowledge your eternity so vast. And that we glimpse apprehend at least a little of the immortal feast that you prepare for those who serve the marginalized, those considered outcast, to see within the unique journey the struggle with sin, to sonder and value the good elements from our past, that our wisdom increase, and so also our efforts toward peace, to represent our investment in all that is true. For we see ourselves as creatures belonging to sod, while at the same time having elements of God. So we ask your blessing on our presenters and our participants, that our discussions be pleasing to you. In the name of Jesus, amen. Okay, we move then to the review session, and fundamentally, we like to give everyone 5 minutes to share the essential elements. It's a little bit like the archaeologist getting at the end of the season to lay out all the artifacts and let people walk by and review and say, here are the key ones that ought to be talked about. Here are the ones that we need to ask more questions about. These are the ones that need to be publicized. And so we begin with our brother Bill from the Australians. Bill Shepard, the floor is yours. If you'd like a review of it, please.
The Missouri Mormon period is little understood. It understood basically by Mormons, because Mormons have learned that the problems in Missouri were the fault of the Missourians, but historically, it's a period, it was a clash of cultures. It was a period with both sides at times being in the wrong, marked by broken dreams, unbelievable hardship, and bloodshed. The main thought that I have is Mormons were not innocent. Mormons participated in the plundering of Gallatin and Millport, the Battle of Crooked River, where people were killed on both sides. So I think what I tried to do, and we tried to do in the article about Mormons and Missourians, 1839 to 44, was to show that basically, repeating for the third time, it was a clash of cultures, North, South, distrust, dislike. The worst things that we think about the non-Mormons of the early period, the same factors were within the Mormon camp. That's basically my thought.
Very good. That's brief, that's concise, and I certainly agree that the clash in cultures, particularly when you look at Missouri from 1820 to be a slave state, and Mormons coming into Western Missouri, insisting upon a place called Zion, where everybody would be equal, where they would accept savages as equals, where Black people who, whether they had the certificate of emancipation or not, could be equal. And in the Missouri Constitution, if you were Black, you were a slave unless you carried your emancipation papers. And so that kind of cultural difference certainly was a significant difference. And I'll stop there too, so we can move on. And Ron Smith is with us. Ron, give us your summary, please.
Okay. Sorry I was late tonight. Um, there are two completely distinct stories about the birth of Christ in the Bible. In Matthew, we find the one about the wise men coming to Jerusalem to ask where the Messiah is to be born. They've seen his star. They follow the star from Jerusalem to the house where the young child is. And then Herod kills the children from 2 years old and under, according to the time that he's inquired of the wise men. In Luke, we find the story about the shepherds abiding in their fields by night, keeping watch over the flocks, and the angels come and tell them that the Messiah is born, and they go to find the Messiah, and he is wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And they go out and tell everybody about it. And 40 days later, we find Mary and Joseph taking Jesus to the temple to be blessed. And so these two stories are very different. And if you take some people's point of view that are critics of the Bible, they will say, well, they got made up to satisfy the audiences of Matthew and Luke. But I think a careful reading shows that they're actually from different time periods, and that the Luke's story is about the night that Jesus was born, and the wise men's story is about 2 years later. And then when you put that with the Book of Mormon, you find that in the Book of Mormon, people who had been preaching about Christ all of their lives, Nephi, etc., had 5 years warning by Samuel the Lamanite, who came and said that Jesus would be born in 5 years. And of course, we have the story about the time being thought to be over, and so it was pretty close to 5 years. And then 2 years ahead of time, there are wise men who are visited by angels and told about what's going to happen, and the prophecies begin to be fulfilled. And I believe that if you put those stories together, you find that perhaps the wise men originated in the Book of Mormon lands, and were believers in Christ who came, and that the gifts that they brought, the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, were used by Joseph to take his family to Egypt for an unspecified amount of time until Herod was dead, and then they came back and went to Nazareth. So I think that putting those stories together with the help from the Book of Mormon makes a very interesting story, and it makes a single story out of two disparate stories, and helps us to understand what the Lord has in mind. The evidence is only circumstantial. There's nothing that says that the wise men came from such and such a place, but I believe that if we look carefully at the story, that there's certainly an intriguing possibility there, and so that's the way I like to present it to my children, my family, and my church.
Thank you, Ron. Really concise, and what a remarkable addition the Book of Mormon is to our understanding of the scripture overall, when we can see it as you have presented it. I hope that everyone picks up on that imagery, because another example to me is that when Christ blessed the children, the angels appeared in the Book of Mormon. We don't get that in the biblical account. So the addition of the Book of Mormon perspective is, I think, a very useful one. Very good. All right, our third presentation.
Yes, and you also have the other thing that you have there is you have the continuity of angels, not only in telling people about that it's going to happen, but then the angels telling the wise men to go home another way, the angels appearing to Joseph telling him to go to Egypt, you have the preservation of life and the whole story involving those the angels, and I think that's pretty neat too.
Very good, and thank you. David Ferriman is our next presenter, and I'm delighted that he's back with us. It's rare that we get someone who has credentials as a prophet to share with us, and I'm delighted that David is back. I appreciate too, having read some of what he has written, and while I am not in a position to pass judgment, I find that there is a rich enrichment there, although nothing that I have peeled off yet to see as specifically God's word to the modern world. And so perhaps David will help me identify that if that's to be forthcoming.
Okay. Well, I did my summary based on what our initial message was, which is the unifying power of the Book of Mormon, and how the Book of Mormon, I guess you could say, is used within the fellowship. And the brief summary here is that as an ecumenical movement, the Book of Mormon is something that we all share as Latter-day Saints, regardless of anything else. We all have the Bible like every other Christian church. But from there, different doctrine and covenants, et cetera, et cetera. But we all have the Book of Mormon. So the Book of Mormon does not belong to a church or a people, but all believers in Jesus Christ. I've met people, Catholic, Baptist, not even Christian, that love the Book of Mormon. I say that not Christian, also Muslims. So with that, we believe, Kristine and I, that we can be one in Christ and be a kingdom without belonging to the same church or organization. And then the second half of our presentation was on the idea of continuing revelation. And we believe the Book of Mormon is key to that, because our understanding is that if you are praying to the Lord, as Moroni's promise is given in chapter 10 of the book of Moroni, we receive a witness from God, a prophetic witness, unlocking keys of prophetic utterance within ourselves, making all of us a prophetic people through our testimony of the Book of Mormon. And so therefore, Scripture does not begin or end with the Bible or the Book of Mormon, but God continues to speak and to reveal his truths to all of us, as so long as we're willing to listen. And through the Holy Spirit as a guide, we will be able to use the Book of Mormon and other revelations to move forward in Christ and see past all of our differences. Beyond that, the Q&A was kind of extensive, and I couldn't sum that up in 5 minutes.
It was extensive, and probably will be again tonight. And fine, I'm delighted to leave it there.
Beyond that, embrace our differences.
Oh, Kristine wanted me to add, beyond that, embrace our differences.
So there's a strong commonality between the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum, in which we work from our commonalities to try to develop friendship and amicable relationships in spite of our differences, and the thing that you are doing. And so that commonality extends to a brotherhood that I find remarkable, even though I certainly did not anticipate it.
Yep.
All right. Newell Wright would be next, but I think he has not joined us yet. Unless I'm mistaken, he indicated I think he'd be late because he had something else coming in. Brian Stubbs, similarly, I haven't seen. And so hopefully those two will show up. Newell presented the trial of Jesus. Brian Stubbs gave us the Semitic and Uto-Aztecan fascicular cognates, the second edition, now with something over 1,500 cognates that he's found between Semitic languages and the Uto-Aztecans. And that brings us then to Merle Hillson. And I saw him come on early, and so, Brother Hillson, your turn.
Merle, you'll have to be unmuted.
How's that?
That's better. We can hear you
Am I
now.
coming
Thank
through?
you. Yep.
Okay. All right. I have here something which kind of occurred to me when I first started reading the Book of Mormon about. I've read the Book of Mormon several times, but what I meant to say was that when I started reading it the last time, which is about a couple 3 months ago, I came across these words, prosper, and the Book of Mormon indicates that if you seek the Lord diligently with lowliness to heart, that is the key to prospering. And prospering, of course, means to thrive or succeed. And in First Nephi, verse 54, we find these words: "Inasmuch as you shall keep my commandments, you shall prosper and be led to a land of promise." And also it indicates if you do not keep his commandments, you will be cut off from the Lord. And perhaps a number of us may have experienced that from time to time, depending on how close we feel that we are to him in our daily walk with him. I know that's happened to me several times, and it's not something I really enjoy having happen, but it does happen if you get so busy doing something else, you forget to pray to him the way you would like to have him in your heart. But that's just a problem that any of us can run into if we're not careful. And we find these words, prosper and not prospering, all through the Book of Mormon. Like the very first reference to this is in First Nephi, verse 54. And then we find it way towards the end of the Book of Mormon. This isn't the end, but it's close to it. In Hillson, chapter 2, verse 49, we find these words: "And it came to pass that they did repent, and inasmuch as they did repent, they did begin to prosper." So we find the words prosper and not prospering all through the Book of Mormon. And it seems to go up and down like this here, like the waves in the sea, or like the wind blowing, where you get gusts at time and sometimes the wind slacks off. And I think that's kind of true of human nature. Sometimes we're just closer to God, and sometimes we aren't so close because we get busy doing something else, or somehow something slips into our daily walk, and we kind of forget where we're at. And so it's something we all have to watch, I think, so we maintain that closeness with God in our daily prayers to Him, because it's so easy to slip away. At least it is for me, and I presume I'm not a whole lot different from most everybody else. And we see this. And if we go clear back to Adam and Eve, they were told to not eat of the tree of the certain fruit. They weren't supposed to eat off the tree of knowledge. And as we look at this is in first section of the Doctrine and Covenants, where God says here in verse 5F, "For I, the Lord, cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. Nevertheless, he that repents and does the commandments of God shall be forgiven." So apparently it doesn't take a whole lot, and we're not quite as close to God as we'd like to be, because it doesn't seem like a terribly hard sin to me if you're just told not to eat a certain fruit off from a tree, and you take a bite off from that, and now you're estranged from God's Spirit. It seems to me that's a whole lot of a lesser crime than if you go out and commit murder. But both of them are sins which take us away from God. So any sin is something that is not God's will. That's the real focus of sin. And it's something where we replace ourselves with God, and what we're doing is more important than what we say God should be having his will done in our life. And it's something we have to watch all the time, and it becomes difficult to walk that straight and narrow path. And it reminds me of what this lady from our church said the last time I saw her in Sunday school. And some of you may know her. Her name was Pat Malice, and she was from Boone, Iowa. And we had been studying the Book of Mormon in our class. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was on to give a presentation or not, but the last words I heard her say was, "Why does it have to be so hard?" And I'm not sure what she exactly had reference to, but I presume it was that close walk with Christ that you have to make an effort to, at least I do, to be sure I follow his will, or it's so easy to slip away. But God says, nevertheless, he who repents will be forgiven. So we have that opportunity to come back to him, which I'm sure we have all made use of. And when I think of our country, there's a lot of reference to the fact that when the people from Europe first came over, most of them were Christian people, and they wanted to escape the disopportunity, you might say, the lack of opportunity to practice their religion back in their home country. And so they came here where they thought they could do that. And some of the first people to come were the pilgrims on the Mayflower. And before they got here, they signed a pact, which we call the Mayflower Compact. And I'd like to read some of this to you. And it says here, and I got this off on the internet, the Mayflower Compact was a set of rules for self-governance established by the English settlers who traveled to the New World on the Mayflower in 1620. The compact was signed by 41 adult male colonists, including 2 indentured servants, on November 11, 1620. The document was created to ensure a functioning social structure would prevail after the settlers landed in Massachusetts instead of northern Virginia, where they intended to lay anchor. The Mayflower Compact was written by the men aboard the Mayflower, consisting of separatist Puritans and adventurers and tradesmen. And the next sentence is a key sentence. The Mayflower Compact is considered a significant document in American history because it was the first document to establish democracy in the New World. And now I fear for our country, because it seems like our country is going downhill as far as religion is concerned. We're getting fewer and fewer people that go to church, and this has really been precipitated more by when COVID came into the land and people had to stay home, and a lot of them have just kind of forgotten to go back to church after COVID. And that's even happened in our group here in Ames, Iowa. So, and we see more and more of these shootings where people use high-powered rifles and unload them on somebody, and even in church, which you get it in the news every so often. And it isn't even the news anymore because it's happened so frequent. And I fear for our country if we're going to continue along that path, that we have forgotten where we have come from and where how Christ is important in our lives. And we just, I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody does for that matter. So I greatly fear what may happen if this trend doesn't change. And so I think it behooves all of us to really make it a matter of prayer and make a strong effort to stay in line so we don't deviate one way or the other. And when I was on before, one fellow asked a question, which commandment is most important? And I can't answer that, except I can say this. I think the commandment to not kill is probably the worst one. Now, beyond that, I don't know which one. That's probably the most important one. But it sounds to me like from section 1 of the Doctrine and Covenants that all of them are important. And I presume when you feel the presence of God's Spirit in your life to do something, and then you don't do it, that you are then, that was a commandment for you personally. And if you didn't do that, then you are on the outside and you have to repent and come back to him. So the haves and haves not as far as religion is concerned, and then the prosper or not prosper. If we do not do what he says we should do, we are not prospering. And that falls over into whether we heed the Spirit that comes into our life also. So that's my presentation for this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to move to James Loumiet. He was invited by Blair Bryant because Blair Bryant was in the last session presenting the role of belief in the plan of salvation. And he saw that what James Loumiet had done in God's covenant with Enoch and Noah and the fulfillment in Jesus Christ and the fullness of the gospel laid an excellent background for it. And so he arranged for James to share with us. James, give us your briefing, if you would, please.
Okay. We'll keep it to 3 basic points. As you said, it was actually from a witness article that Blair had run across, which was from the Enoch Covenant book, but talking about the relationship between God's covenants, that if you look in Matthew chapter 1, you get the lineage of Jesus from Abraham down to Jesus himself. And what you find is that, and Matthew makes this point in chapter 1, verse 5 in the inspired version, that between these different persons in Jesus's lineage were 14 generations apart. And it turns out Abraham and David were 2 of these figures, and they're major covenant figures. We have the Abrahamic covenant, Davidic covenant. Well, if you go back 14 generations from Abraham, you have God's covenant with Enoch. You have Enoch there and God's covenant with him. And then, of course, 14 generations after the Babylonian captivity, you have the new covenant, which was established by Christ. But one of the things that conspicuously sticks out in this is when you get to the 14 generation period between David and Christ, it doesn't mention the name of the person. I think it's Josiah, if I remember correctly, something like that. But anyway, you don't have that person's name. It makes the point that from David to the captivity in Babylon, to the Babylonian captivity, was 14 generations, and from then to Christ, which is an odd thing to put in there when you're listing people, and you have those people listed of, who were part of Jesus's, who was in Jesus's lineage at that time frame. And there were 2 takeaways from that. One is that, and I went through this in some detail, is the 14 generations, that number 14 is a witness of Jesus. If you go in the Old Testament and look at some of the different sacrifices and offerings, either using 7 or 14 unblemished lambs, that, those are types of Christ. So that the Lord used that as a witness of Christ, that number 14, and it appears in different places in different ways, including in Jesus's lineage. But the other thing is that what it tells us is that these covenants are organically linked together. In other words, they weren't just these randomly occurring events that were, happening in haphazard fashion, that there was a greater overarching plan that was taking place. And if you get into the study of these covenants, what you find is that, they are the divinely sanctioned framework by which God's saving work is governed and fulfilled. And Jesus Christ is the center of all of it. It is, as a book I had referenced, called The Christ of the Covenants, and that's exactly what he is. The next point is that the reference of the Babylonian captivity is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb, because again, we've got Enoch, Abraham, David, and Jesus, establishing the new covenant. But this reference to the Babylonian captivity is the oddball or the outlier. I believe it is a reference to Lehi, because the Babylonian captivity was the backdrop in the context for Lehi and his family being brought by the Lord out of Jerusalem and into the land of promise in the Americas, and on which that was given to the seed of Joseph under covenant with Lehi and extended to, his seed and the seed of Joseph. But Lehi was not a actually a member of Jesus's lineage because he was of Manasseh and Jesus is of Judah. But yet that covenant is there. It's right there in that time frame. And I think it's just too awfully coincidental that it fits right there. So, looking at it that way, I think what we're seeing with the reference to the Babylonian captivity is a hidden reference to God's covenant with Lehi and the Book of Mormon. I do not know, would love to know what Matthew knew and when did he know it when he put this together. What was he thinking? Was he inspired? Did he have more information than we have in his gospel about things that had taken place? I don't know. And then the third point is that and this was something Blair was interested in, looking at the evidence that the gospel or the new covenant had been from the beginning. And of course, we looked at, Adam making sacrifices to the Lord. And at one point, an angel appears to him and says, why are you doing this? He says, I don't know, except the Lord commanded me, which is plenty good a reason for doing something. But this idea that in the inspired version, which is unique among other Bible versions, is that the gospel it was known from the beginning, that the new covenant was from the beginning. And that we find this also, and I referenced a book called The Blood Covenant by H. Clay Trumbull, that the blood covenant practices found throughout various cultures, and this was a book that based on a series of lectures that had been done in the late 1800s, showed that the blood covenant practices among all these cultures across the world, many who supposedly had no known contact with each other, had an awful lot of overlap and similarity. Well, where did they get this idea? Well, I think this idea, my working theory is this idea is consistent with what we know from the inspired version, that this idea of blood sacrifice and it being a representation of the sacrifice of Christ goes back to the beginning in the time of Adam.
All right, thank you. I recognize that by having Blair make the request and for you laying out those 3 key points, that'd be awfully nice to have him follow it up. I think that the majority of people were here to hear his role of belief in the plan of salvation. I would highlight that beyond his sketch to show that there were only 4 references to belief in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but 7 pages of references to belief in John. And then I checked on the Book of Mormon and found some 50 references, and they almost all were the same as the ones in the Bible, with the additional one that we have that beautiful statement in Alma about if you let the desire to believe germinate within you like a seed, then it can give rise to an understanding, to faith, an understanding, and ultimately to knowledge. That would be one, again, specific kind of addition the Book of Mormon makes on that topic to the other scriptures. All right, Brian Stubbs has joined us, and I'm delighted because his erudition on the linguistics topic is one of the more fascinating that we have to deal with. And while I've sketched it as vesicular cognates, I think he doesn't use that term. So let's let him give his own review.
Hey, very good. Did I unmute? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have much really. I kind of gave the whole thing, and all I'll do is add, just kind of review it quickly, and then those that want a copy, it's a second edition of that huge monster book, about 500,000 words. The second edition of Exploring the Explanatory Power of Semitic and Egyptian in Uto-Aztecan. So it's the huge technical evidence of all 1,560. I think we end up with 1,657, I think, matches, word matches that are really interesting if linguistic stuff interests you. And but it is quite long and tedious if it's not your cup of tea. But if you'd like it does not exist in published paper book form. It only exists in a PDF, electronic form. And so those that would like a copy, we can get you a copy. I think I sent it to Brother DeBarth and some others maybe, and you can either get it from them or email me directly if you'd like a copy. But like I say, it's mainly for linguists and specialists, but lay people can get a fair amount out of it. And so it's an enlargement and a few things improved, and basically that's it. And if you're interested in a copy, we can get you one. Other than that, I don't know that I need to add anything to last time's.
Well, let me recommend it because while I am not a linguist, I've had a couple of courses in linguistics, and to appreciate the massive amount of work that has gone into producing this manuscript, and to just simply go through and select a few examples to look at, to try to compare and see the phenomenal detailed combinations that appear to trace directly to be commonalities between the Semitics and the Uto-Aztecans. We're talking about family groups. We're not talking about well, he's dealing with individual words from specific languages, but those languages are from language families, and as such, then there's some difference between what you'll find within a family as well. And so there's a great deal of opportunity for him to pursue those. But as an archaeologist, looking at the truth that every artifact shares in its story, he is basically looking at the artifacts of words and looking at the truths that they carry from one culture as they cross to another. It's a fascinating study. I'm deeply impressed with it. The nature of his study is at the frontier, and I really would hope that other people would pick up on it because there's a tremendous potential, I believe, in pursuing that further. All right. I haven't seen Newell Wright.
I believe he's here, Paul.
He is?
I think so.
Okay, well, he
Yeah, he's here.
Good. Well, then, Newell, you can speak for yourself on the trial of Jesus. And thank you for coming. We held a spot at the end for you.
Well, I see him on. He's not, I don't see his picture.
Well, while we're looking for him to come on, let me lay the question for everyone. What are the commonalities that you see among the presentations that we've had? What is there that crosses among these presentations and adds meaning to our lives? Newell, do we have you here?
He actually sent a message, Paul, and he said he wasn't able to activate his mic or his video, so I think he's dropped off and he's going to try to come back in.
All right, there you
Comes
go.
again. Let's see if this is better. He's back in, but I don't see him yet. Go ahead with your questions there, Paul.
Well, I wanted to lay that question out there when we are looking at the messages that we're learning from the Book of Mormon, messages that we're learning that we think are divinely inspired. Then particularly, I think it's useful if we can find those that are somehow hidden in common among the presentations. And so I'm curious what commonalities you can identify among our presenters, or what they have presented. And the floor should be open as well for everyone to start claiming a spot here, but we do want to give Newell Wright the chance to get in first if we can. Was he the last one coming in, Deb?
Yeah, he was, and I can see him back in again, but he's not visible and his mic isn't working yet. His feed won't unmute and it won't allow him to turn on his videos.
Well, I gave a presentation at Nauvoo a couple of days ago, and we had spent hours preparing to make sure that the Nauvoo swamp that David was presenting would be something he could present on Zoom. And so since I was there with my presentation on the computer immediately available, then therefore there shouldn't be any problem with that. We got it worked out for David's presentation, and then suddenly when it came time for mine, he wasn't able to get mine to plug in, and so I presented without the pictures. Finally, somebody came by that was able to replug, and so we had my pictures for the last 10 minutes, but it was interesting that technology still finds a way to rear its ugly head and disrupt us.
Okay, Val has his hand up. Are you ready for questions, Paul?
Let's proceed. Go ahead. Take it, Val.
Yeah. Yeah, so my first question is for Brian Stubbs, Brother Stubbs. Do you see much in the way, as you're looking at these languages, are you seeing much in the way of systematic sound shifts where multiple words have the same shifted beginning? Like when we're studying Indo-European stuff, you can look at all the Indo-European languages, and you'll have languages that have systematic differences, like German. Think for a second here, it'd be well, the V and the F. English will have F's in the place of V's, or vice versa. So as you're looking at the Uto-Aztecan and the other Semitic languages, do you find those kinds of systematic shifts in sound?
Yes, very much so. In fact, yeah, in fact, if you want to get a copy of that book from Paul, it has all the sound correspondences. In fact, they have like 30 examples of the sound change of B, and we have really 24 to 36 examples of every sound change, and they are consistent that way according to the comparative method, and they align with the comparative method. In fact, what's interesting is we have so many examples of most sound changes, while other language families in the Americas, Native American language families that linguists work on, boy, sometimes they're happy to find 2 or 3 examples of a certain sound change. And so it is really quite abundantly backed up that way.
Are they the types of sound changes that you would expect as you sort of do a phonetic analysis? Like a lot of times you'll just lose voicing on a sound, or you might get a shift from the lips to the dental position. Is that the kind of thing you're seeing where they're predictable?
Yes, they're all. Yes, they're all typical sound changes. For example, all the voiced stops become voiceless. So we have in Hebrew, you've got B, D, G, G, Badaga, and you've got Pataka. You have both the voiceless and voiced sets. Whereas in Uto-Aztecan they merge. So the voiced stops lose their voicing and merged with the voiceless stops. So yeah, that kind of thing is quite consistent.
Well, it's impressive. It's an impressive set of facts. I'm surprised that more of our Book of Mormon believing folks haven't grabbed onto your work, because as I've seen it reported in the Interpreter, I think was where I saw it. I was impressed.
Yeah, and actually almost every linguist that looks at it carefully is convinced that it's solid. Even the non-LDS linguists, of the 30 that I sent preliminary editions to, probably 8 or 10 responded, and 6, all of them except two found it strong and solid. The two who disagreed really didn't look at it very closely. And as soon as they, in fact, that's what's on the interpreter is my response to those two, because they missed a whole bunch of stuff. And as soon as I explained their errors of perception more clearly, it was obvious that they had simply skipped a lot and did not look through the case very thoroughly at all.
The last thing I'd say is, I think people could accept your theory even without the Book of Mormon. It isn't necessarily wedded to the Book of Mormon, because you could, my guess is that the Phoenicians had a Semitic language, right? And they were huge seafarers. So
yeah, Phoenician is the same language as Hebrew. I mean, they're basically the same. Hebrew is a dialect of Northwest Semitic that they borrowed from Phoenician and Canaanite, which are all three about the same. You're right that it wouldn't necessarily have to be linked to the Book of Mormon. Of course, you've got one of the things that the linguists have, and it's strictly emotional. I mean, it's not academic. They're not looking at it academically and deciding, yes, this is strong or not strong. They just don't like the idea. A number of ideas they don't like. They don't like transoceanic is one thing they don't like, and especially anything to do with Israel. I mean, you know, for the last few hundred years, you know, from 200 years ago, or well, actually from shortly after Columbus, from the 1500s until the 1800s, it was commonly thought by many people that the Native Americans might be the lost tribes of Israel, and so people were kind of dabbling in that in various ways for lots of years, decades, and centuries, and the linguists really got turned off to that kind of thing. And so just having to do with Israel, they don't like that. And then they, of course, most of them are aware of the Book of Mormon, and so they realize the implications. So you take all three of those. They don't like transoceanic. They don't like trying to connect it with Israel, like has been like a lot of people have done over the last 300 years. And they especially don't like the very convenient relevance to the Book of Mormon. So they just basically don't like it, and most of them just trying to ignore it, and that's fine. It'll be there. It'll get accepted someday. It'll just, who knows what it'll take or when, after I'm gone probably, but that's fine. A lot of things are accepted after the discoverer is gone.
well, thanks for the work.
Thank you.
I'm done with my questions, so go ahead.
Thanks, Val. Phil Harper, go ahead.
Hear me?
Barely.
Okay, we had this problem last time. But anyway, I'll speak a little louder. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm from the Noromoc Wintu Nation out of California, Northern California, and the people called the Wintu, which means people, through California, went all the way down the valley floor, all the way to San Francisco. And I mentioned this before, but they, you know, their language is a language called the Putwin language, and but that language is just a little block. It goes over from California Valley over into Nevada, right on top of the Sierra Nevada mountains and on across, and then comes back on the Algonquins on the north end of Mount Shasta and goes all the way across the country. And but anyway, we do have back in the 1800s, they did come in and haul a lot of our stuff off to Smithsonian Institute, and with bodies too. And they're in a vaults in there in the Smithsonian Institute down at the bottom.
Yeah,
And but anyway, they started reappropriating those back to whoever can prove that they are your people and whatever. And then basically from basketry to different things, and so they're kind of sending things home now. But anyway, I was just kind of wondering, when Joseph Smith in the Bible, when he found the Urim and Thummim, and the records of Urim being the Urim and the Thummim, which being a piece that he could translate with. And so those things had to be, they weren't written in English or any language that I know that they could have been, but the stone was given the ability to interpret that. And long as he had that and they behaved themselves, I guess, they were able to do that and write the Book of Mormon. That's what you're reading through the Book of Mormon. But it wasn't in English; it was in their language. And so I think what's really key. What do you think about that, Brian?
Think about the fact that about the Wintu and the Maidu.
Oh yeah, the
Wintuan language family is a interesting language family. I took a look at it. A lot of those California language families have interesting things in them. In other words, all groups are mixtures of quite a few things. In fact, for example, the Navajo are a mixture of Bering Strait. Their language came from across the Bering Strait, but their DNA shows that they've intermixed with the Uto-Aztecans and the other Pueblos. And so they're a mixture of Bering Strait blood and Nephite and Lamanite and probably who knows how many others, as most of us are. I mean, all of us, even Europeans, we're mixtures of, my children have about 20 different ethnic groups in their ancestry. And so the Maidu, the Wintuan, they're definitely have a Lehi strand in them. In fact, most of those California languages, I think Lehi got up in there and mixed with all those groups to varying degrees. What we don't know is the degree or the percentage of whatever. But yeah, Lehi is up in all of those, mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff, and so it might be small percentages or medium percentages. We just don't know, but all that remains yet to be determined. But yeah, I think I found the Wintuan languages kind of interesting. Some interesting leads in there, but unless there's a sizable amount, it's you can't really make a convincing case. Even though in fact, several of their ancestral strands would not have any language evidence left in it. So, but it's a very interesting, very valid and valuable group.
Yeah, in our group, we have a person that they did recordings of Josie McKibben's, and but anyway, she's got several books out called The Bag of Bones and whatnot, but she's gone now. So, but they got a lot of the linguistics from a lot of the words and the things from a few of the elders before they passed away. And so that we do have those words that they had linguists to come in and write a lot of the linguistics and for different ones. But I noticed amongst the people, like the Winnemem, Winnemem means water. And so the people that along the river and lived along the river were of the Wintu, but they were their real names was their location that they had, so they were the river people, the water people. And ours is Norrelmuck, which is Nor meaning south downriver, Rel up above, and muck like a turtle shell shape. And there's a piece of land where the creek goes around and it looks like a turtle when you look from 6,000 foot level. And but anyway, it looks like a turtle. So that's our little things that we have all kinds of identities and also petroglyphs and all of those different things throughout. And And that's all the way spreads across the Yahi and the Achamawi and Achagewi. Those are the real names, and they're place names. That's basically what it is. But the people called us the people because we said Wintu. And but they reached all the way down. At one time, the Maidu were also the part of the people because they're on the rim of the mountains there, the valley floor. And but anyway, I was just wondering, Joseph Smith, he had to interpret these things out of the plates, and so I think that took quite of a well, you can almost say it's a miracle, and because
Yes, definitely.
he had to been divinely told to from off of the plates what was going on, and I mentioned before that the Osage Nation in Independence, Missouri, had an experience of Jesus Christ appearing to them. I talked to the chief personally, and he told me the story, and out of the Osage tribe. But what I'm looking at is the purpose of all these things is the reason is it identifies with the Word of God. It identifies with the Bible all the way through. And we can find where, yes, people come over here and on down, but they all talk about what went on in the Old Testament and the New, and some of them had also visions that Jesus would appear. And I think that's a real relevant case when we're still struggling with linguistics. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I honor your ability to try to decipher all this and all you guys that have tried, because it does take quite a work.
Well, Phil, I think you'll appreciate that the next 2 weeks we have Rainbow Eagle coming to present, and while he'll be presenting more of his research on the Jewish vantage point, he has already presented about the pile of stones and the evidence of 2,000 years of a peace center at the same location on his medicine wheel, at the same location that Joseph Smith designated as a center place in Independence, which then also became the place from which President Truman announced the United States would be part of the United Nations. Again, representing that focus on peace.
Yeah, good.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
Newell is in now. We can see him, and I think we're going to be able to hear him.
All right, Newell, if you want to give us your review and brief, I appreciate it. Thank you for persisting to get in. Understanding you had some difficulty.
Yeah, I'm actually using my cell phone now. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we hear you fine.
All right. I talked about the parallels between two trials, the trial of Jesus Christ and then the trial of Alma and Amulek and Ammonihah. There's a lot of really interesting parallels. For example, Christ is arrested, bound, and taken before Jewish leaders. Alma and Amulek are arrested, bound, and taken before Nehorite leaders. Witnesses accuse Christ of blasphemy. The witnesses accuse Alma and Amulek of blasphemy. The Jewish leaders condemn Christ. The Nehorite leaders condemn Alma and Amulek. Christ is insulted, mocked, and smote on his cheeks. And Alma and Amulek are insulted, mocked, and smote on their cheeks. They're both said, you saved others, but you can't save yourself. Save yourself and we will believe you. And that happened with both Christ and Alma and Amulek. When questioned by Jewish leaders and by Herod or Pilate, Christ answers nothing. And when faced with the silent Christ, Pilate says, knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee? When questioned by Nehorite leaders, Alma and Amulek answer nothing. And when silent, the Nehorite chief judge says, know ye not that I have power to deliver you up unto the flames? There's a number of other things. The crucifixion. Now, after being arrested, interrogated, mocked, and scourged, Christ is crucified for the sins of blasphemy and sedition against the Jewish leaders. Now, the crucifixion in Alma 14 is a bit kind of hidden, but it's the innocent women and children who are burned alive. They're a type of Christ. They represent the burnt offerings in the temple. The unblemished lambs that, when completely consumed by fire, symbolize the crucifixion of Christ on the cross. And the link to Christ is made even more clear by a seemingly innocuous detail when they also burn the scriptures, or the word, or word with a capital W, is also burned and destroyed. There are witnesses to the crucifixion in the New Testament and in the Book of Mormon. The centurion and Zeezrom play parallel roles. There is an earthquake in the temple veil. In the old world, a mighty earthquake occurs and the veil of the temple is rent in twain. In the new world, a mighty earthquake occurs and the walls of the prison are rent in twain. Christ dies, the graves open, and many saints are resurrected and appear unto many. And in the Book of Mormon, an earthquake knocks down the walls of the temple, and Alma and Amulek live, but the other people in the prison die. And they emerge from the wreckage in the mass death as if they were resurrected, then go into the city and are seen by many. So that's the heart of the parallels that we looked at. And then we answered some other questions that surrounded that. For example, what do these intentional parallels mean? And why does Mormon parallel Christ's trial before it ever happened? And we had quite a discussion of the answer to that. So that, I'm not sure it took 5 minutes, but that is a pretty accurate summary of what I talked about.
I think it is accurate, very well done. Thank you. I would like to lay before all of you presenters a question that I think is substantive for each of you and for all of us. And that question is, what do we learn from your presentation about how to deal with opposition? How should we be dealing with opposition? What can we learn from these, from the presentations that you have given, the research you've done? And I'd like to open that one for everyone that has presented, and certainly have no objections to other people as well. But I would be very, well, if you don't mind tracing through, I would put you on the spot if you don't volunteer.
I'll volunteer since I just spoke. You know, Alma and Amulek face a lot of opposition in the Book of Mormon, and they do it so that they can get their message across and then function as witnesses of Christ. And I think that's something that is important for each one of us to keep in mind as we face opposition, because being a witness of Christ is not necessarily popular in today's day and age.
And so how should we deal with it? What are we learning from you to deal with it? Allow ourselves to be persecuted?
Face the opposition on 2 feet and trust in the Lord.
Trust the Lord. All right, Brother Ferriman, your hand is up.
I think that if we are to be a prophetic people, we can't have a definitive answer to the question. The answer that we have to have is an ability to listen at all times to the Spirit. And when facing any sort of questions about our beliefs or persecutions against us, seek what wisdom the Lord has for us in that moment. It has been my personal experience that whenever I try any other solution, it's mine and I fail. But if I do that, I generally make it out okay.
Please help me. You say seek to be led?
Yes. We need to, if we're to be a prophetic people, that we don't need to rely on our own wisdom. We need to develop that kind of personal relationship with the Lord so that we can hear the promptings of the Spirit when we're in that moment. We can't get emotional or allow anxiety to overwhelm us, but know that because of the personal relationship we have with the Lord and the constant companion of the Holy Spirit, the Lord can help us through any situation, even if it's not the result we want, we can have faith that the result will be the one that the Lord is seeking for us and for them.
So that strikes me as being parallel to the rather remarkable Chiefs victory yesterday.
I didn't see the game, so I don't know.
Oh.
I'll take your word for it.
Well, but staying calm under the duress of being 10 points down
Okay.
and being able to play each play, to have a big lineman be able to reach his hand up and block an extra point proves to be crucial. The penalties are crucial, but being able to get the crucial catch at the right time, but finally being able to systematically work your way down and ultimately get the score. I mean, it was tied up and then went into overtime, and the Chiefs finally won on a rather extended drive. Just beautiful play, but they had to stay calm. Nobody could panic. Nobody get all bent out of shape. Stay calm and do your job.
Well, I think the most important thing to what you just said, though, is no one did it alone.
Good
They
point.
all relied on each other, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Is you can't think that we can do it ourselves, but through the teamwork of the Holy Spirit, that's how we're going to make it through. So yeah, absolutely, beautifully said.
I'd add in Patrick Mahomes was wearing a cross, and his first comment after he was interviewed was "Give praise to the Lord." So that fits with our context too.
Well, and you might note that his coach is practicing Mormon. Ron, you want to get on this one?
Well, I wasn't going to get in on the Super Bowl, but
okay. Well, the earlier question is what I'm calling on you for.
And mine didn't have a lot to do with opposition, but one of the things that has come up over and over and over again, and I think is really critical, is that we have the scriptures. We may not always understand everything that's there, but I've always believed, my mother taught me this, that we can depend on those scriptures if we look at them in a correct way. And it's not necessarily that, like in my case, that we're gonna come to a truth that I can fight with somebody about. I don't have to fight with anybody about it. I just think it's so beautiful when you see it that that it can be helpful. We don't have to listen to all of the naysayers that say it's not that the scriptures don't mean anything. I really think there were real people who wrote them down and who were looking at, with all of the infirmities, with all of the shortcomings of people, but they wrote them down so that we would have them and we can use them. And I think as we go forward and we see the situation that the world is in, that the United States is in, that we're facing, being able to rely on the things that are written is going to be a very important important lesson for us.
So the opposition there is not going to be in tune with the scriptures. If we are, then that should withstand. I think I hear you saying.
Yes. I mean, it's one of those. It's the scriptures and the Holy Spirit together. Those are the pillars that will keep us together and keep us afloat.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that agrees with what Dave was saying as well.
Yeah.
I think I see a slight nod over there. Okay. All right, Deb, back to the queue.
Okay, David Kaysen and then Phil. Go ahead, please, David.
I was just wanted to add to what I was thinking about his question was we have to realize when we're speaking about the adversary of recognizing always who that adversary is and realizing that the most important thing for any saint, former day or latter day, is to give testimony. It's not something we're to keep to ourselves necessarily, but to testify and to have a testimony both towards our fellow man, our brothers and sisters, and also for our Heavenly Father. And I think if we're able to keep that in mind, then we can, and recognize that, then dealing with adversaries is much easier. We don't have to necessarily win, but we have to understand that we feel that we have testified correctly and have administered the gospel and utilized the Holy Spirit correctly. And I just think that has always given me comfort in the way in which I have dealt with a lot of adversaries. Thank you.
Let me ask you to clarify when you say utilize the Holy Spirit correctly.
Correctly, yes. A lot of people have a mistaken idea of what sometimes a lot of people, not Mormons, but a lot of people claim to have the Holy Spirit. And we have to be able to recognize a true spirit. The Book of Mormon has given us a lot of instances where people have been misled, and they have to be able to recognize when they're being misled.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil and then Val. Go ahead, please, Phil.
Yeah, what had come to me as we're talking here is, when battles come up, we know who makes the battle, and that's the devil. Now, the thing is, how do we come against the devil? Well, the Bible says, with joy shall ye draw out of the wells of salvation. And how important that is for us to obtain that joy in the time of need. What's your joy all about? Well, how about eternal life? What about eternal life? And the Lord told me, he said, the other day, he said, eternal life is in heaven, but it's on earth too. It's in you. And you don't have to go to heaven to get it. You already have it. So with joy shall you draw out of the wells of salvation. Don't let the devil rob you of your joy. Stand strong and and that's where your faith begins to grow.
Thanks, Phil. Go ahead, Val.
Yeah, so Merle, I've got a question for you. I share your concern about the loss of faith in our country. I happily in places like Africa and actually much of Asia, Christian belief is growing, so we can be grateful for that. But certainly in our country, people's involvement with religion is going down. I may have not understood the context when you said this, but I think you said you were asked what the most important commandment is, and the conclusion you came to is don't kill, and that's obviously really important. But it's also something that pretty much everybody except for crazy people agree with, or ideologues that are so committed to some utopian vision that they'll kill people for the sake of the vision. But I thinking about the Book of Mormon, I think the Book of Mormon right at the beginning tells us, and what the Savior told us, that the most important commandment is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. And the way the Book of Mormon teaches that in part is by taking on this, what you rightly said is, would seem to be almost the most important commandment. But Nephi is actually led by the Spirit to take the life of Laban in order to accomplish God's purposes. And it's a troubling opening thing in the Book of Mormon, but it does teach in a powerful way that I think, and I'm interested in your thoughts, that our devotion to the Lord, and it needs to be a true devotion, and we got to avoid the false, being misled by false spirits for sure. It's just a couple comments have just been made, but what's your thoughts on the idea that love the Lord with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength is actually the single most important commandment we have?
Well, I would agree with you. If we do that, we'll avoid all the others. We won't be led into temptation. We won't keep company with those who aren't Christian, who are trying to please the Lord. So I would agree with you 100%. And if we all did that, we'd have Zion now, I'm sure. So yes, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Thanks, Val. Brent, and then Roland. Go ahead, Brent.
So my question is directed at James. So I was thinking after your presentation a couple weeks ago, or was it last week? Well, I was trying to liken that to ourselves. And I thought to myself, how far are we out generation-wise in this dispensation? Like if you start with, I would assume Joseph and Lucy as the patriarch, matriarch. How far out are we? How many generations have passed since then? Do you know? Have you thought on that?
Just vaguely, not in terms of this presentation or the paper I wrote. It was really more geared toward another approach. But I have listened or thought of parallels, particularly between the days shortly before the coming of Christ in the Book of Mormon, and things that were taking place there, and how that relates to the latter days. But I don't know, it's so much a generational thing and I'm actually teaching a Sunday school class like this at Waldo right now. There are a lot of types in the scriptures for the latter days, for the end times, more than I realized until recently. And it goes back to, Enoch's covenant, and which is that's also a study in how to deal with conflict, because, they had their enemies, the enemies of the people of God. Satan and his cohorts are always made war in the saints. It's the same battle, and it's going on right now. This is what we're seeing now. Ultimately it's the battle between Zion and Babylon, between the father of lights and the father of lies. And we know how the story ends, but and how Enoch dealt with it, and he told the Lord, "Why are you calling me? I'm the last guy you should be calling." But the Lord endowed him with great power. But anyway, back to this issue of the last days, I look at more, you see these types for the end times of the tribulations, and I believe we're in it, that we're seeing prophecy fulfilled before our eyes, whether it's related to or tied to, so many generations from, say Joseph Jr., Joseph III on down, etc. That, whether it's Isaiah, whether it's other prophecies, whether it is types of the end times, or whether it's parables. I believe that the parable of the prodigal son is talking about the restoration of the house of Israel in the latter days. And so there's a lot to be said there, but so I don't know if that answers your question. I don't have a number like I did with the 14 generations before. I haven't seen anything that would dovetail in with that. You know, the whole point in Matthew is it brings you up to Christ. And of course, Christ is central to everything. But now we're looking not for his first coming, as you're talking about, you know, we're looking at his second coming.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks, though.
Okay. Rainbow Eagle, go ahead, and then Val.
Hello, everybody. I'll say, first of all, here's a little commercial. I appreciate you all making room for me for a couple of Monday evenings. But the commercial is that I've always appreciated being able to try to get into the real of parables and the real stories that we find certainly in the New Testament and the Book of Mormon, and how that it was important to place your net on the other side of the boat. That is my commercial of being able to see if there might be a way of readjusting to life. The second thing here is the opposition thing. And somehow the image that comes to me, and it may be too simple for you because I'm kind of that way. I would see the opposition as the wind and how I can set my sail in a way that it's really directing and taking me where I want to go. And so I'm making use of opposition, being certainly having circumstances where there has been some opposition and resistance, still being able to know how to set your sail so that the opposition begins to benefit you because of your readjustment to the concept of opposition, and to know where is it that you really want to go with the Lord.
Debbie here? What? Is Debbie here?
Okay, Val, go ahead, please.
All right, so this is a question for Ron Smith about his presentation. I don't recall from when you made the presentation, but I'm wondering if you discussed at all the gifts that were brought, especially the frankincense and myrrh. Gold is, of course, a New World kind of product, but frankincense and myrrh, I think, were maybe produced, at least the frankincense, I think, was produced down in Arabia. And I'm wondering how this would, if that's what they brought, do you have an idea about maybe they brought something else that they used the name frankincense for, or do you have any kind of theory about the gifts?
I actually do, and I had it as part of my presentation, but I didn't have time to do it. It turns out that the family of trees that frankincense and myrrh come from, they're sap from a tree, and in Central America they grow to 150 feet high, and they are huge things. In Asia, there are a few species of it, and they grow kind of as scrub trees, and they use them. And so it is still used in Mayan. They use the sap from those trees in Mayan religious practice, and so I think that's one of the things that all three, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, are readily available in Central and South America. So I thought that was fascinating, but I didn't have a chance to throw that in there. So thank you for the question.
Be like,
David Cateson, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I finished reading Abraham Galandi's book on the book of Isaiah, and that really has intrigued me about the use of covenants. And listening to James has really piqued my interest even further. And James, I did send you an email asking how I could get a copy of your book. So, and I never got an answer. So I'd like to ask a second time if I could, because I really would like to get it.
Be glad to. I apologize. It might have went into my spam folder, and I haven't checked it in a week or two, so I'll have to go digging in there. Yeah, I'm familiar with Gileadi's work. I think I've got most of his books. I haven't read them all, but I've gone through quite a few of them. I get his weekly newsletter by email, which comes out on Saturdays, which actually that's some of his best stuff, I think. I'll be right up front. I don't agree with everything he says. It is, as one blogger on the internet said, who apparently knows him, who made the statement, well, his views on Isaiah are just that. And I think you can say that about any of us. Our views on certain things are just that. But, if you're serious about studying Isaiah, he is a good resource. And there are some things that, he opened my eyes to that I thought were very key to understanding Isaiah. And I do take some exception to his use of the Davidic covenant, and something I've looked at a lot. And what he is saying about that, how he uses it, I question that. I've got my reasons what I think may be going on. I can't go into it right now, but it's like any other book you read is, you have to use your own judgment, and in the end study it out and pray about it, and and pray for the spirit of prophecy. And Nephi talks about that in studying Isaiah. Without the spirit of prophecy, it's really going to be hard to understand what's going on. Otherwise, you're just left with reading somebody's book and hoping they have the spirit of prophecy, and you hope they're right. Well, the problem is, even among the LDS, there are other books that are commentaries about Isaiah, and they don't always agree with one another either. So, it's obviously we're commanded to by the Lord to study that book, and it's very relevant to our day because it is speaking very much about the restoration of the house of Israel. Fortunately, one thing I would say, I'm actually working on my own Isaiah commentary right now, but we have a major cheat, what kids would call, video game kids play, who love video games, they would call a cheat code. Well, we have a major cheat code with the Book of Mormon, because Nephi spends a lot of time quoting Isaiah, and there are points where he doesn't quote him exactly, which is fascinating of itself. But then he goes through an expounding on Isaiah, and if you're going to study Isaiah, it is just a great place to start, is starting with what Nephi discusses, because not only does, he quotes chapters 2 through 14, and it was at 48, 49, maybe a little more, and then Jacob and Jesus speak too, but just a lot of information, not just for those chapters that would be applicable to understanding what's going on, but which a lot of it has to do with the restoration house of Israel, but would also apply to the rest of the book of Isaiah, because there's a considerable amount of repetition there.
Well, the part that I was speaking about primarily is the fact that it really did improve my understanding of what the covenants represent, and the importance of understanding those covenants, and the continuity of the covenant, and what the purpose of them are, I'm talking about Isaiah is giving us that information, and that's what I really appreciate about his book. I'm not saying I agree with everything he said either, but it's just the idea and understand that we use these terms all the time, covenant and everything, but there's a certain amount of importance, especially in our day and age, because of the fulfillments of all the covenants, are now clearly in front of us, and very, very, very close. And, we're supposed to be watchful of it. And this is, I think, is the greatest message of the Book of Mormon, and especially of the prophets in the Book of Mormon are telling us what, look there, because there's a lot of things that we need to understand. And I don't think necessarily he was speaking to the people of that day and age as much as he was speaking to us in this day and age. So that's why I really would like to, I'd like to discuss more with you, or read what you, when you do write your commentary on the book of Isaiah. I would like to read it if I could.
Yeah,
anyway,
no, I'd be happy to. It's still a work in progress. It's interesting in what you just said, and you go to Second Nephi 7, and teaching the class I'm teaching right now. The first thing we talked about is you get so many versions of the latter days and the end times and restoration, non-restoration. One thing like about Gilead, like a lot of people, is he comes from a restoration perspective. If you're trying to understand the end times and you don't have the Book of Mormon or some of the other latter day revelations, you got your hands tied behind your back. It's going to be really, really difficult. But the first thing we talked about is, why are these things happening? Why do these end times destructions happen? All these fireworks, and you got some people that are just, this stuff scares them. I got a congregation, it's got a lot of women, and some of them, I'll be honest, they're scared about some of these things they're seeing and wanting to know what to think about it. And we've had to talk about that. But the first thing it says in the first scripture I talked about is why, and it says in 2 Nephi 7:26, it's to fulfill his covenants that he made with the children of men. That's what he is doing in the latter days. It's not just God doesn't like bad people, so he's going to destroy them. God wishes everyone would choose him and his son. He's definitely got a rooting interest in this, even more than Paul with the Chiefs. I mean, God really has a rooting interest in this. And, for us, he is a God of mercy, but he's also a God of justice. And, there will be those who just they're going to reject him. But in the end, he is going to fulfill his covenants. He takes that very serious. And I agree with you. Gilead does make that point, different ways at different times, but that theme is this idea of him fulfilling his covenants with the house of Israel. But Nephi tells us, it's not just the house of Israel, it's all men that are impacted by this. And so that's what we're seeing, is God's beginning the fulfillment of his, I think we're right on the cusp of this, the fulfillment of these covenants. And it's an exciting time.
Well, please send me your book, or tell me how I can get your book. Thank you.
You bet. Will do.
Okay, Ron Edwards, go ahead, please.
Okay, James, this is mainly for you. Want to thank you for the book.
Okay.
In fact, I received it just a few minutes a week ago before the Zoom meeting started on that Monday night, and I barely had time to open the package up. So I was very happy to receive that, and I'm sure you've picked up part of this story. The only thing that is logical is that it was Satan at work. Satan did not want me to have that book. I could have. I'm only 60 miles away from you. The time that I spent trying to get a letter that the web would accept and send that to you, because I had your exact email address written down, and yet an extra letter got inserted in there somehow. I mean, I possibly could have done it, but that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I could have, all the time I spent trying to get that letter to you, I could have driven down to your house and back home. And the time that I spent trying to get that letter to you, Apple had 2 men working on it, and neither one of them could figure out how to get my contact list straightened out to accept the proper address for you. And finally, when the last guy came on, I went to show him what I was talking about in the contact list, and when I opened it up, your correct address was in there. And I think
Wow.
that's when I finally was able to send you the request for the book. So
Well, in fairness, once the email started coming, I don't know, I got like 4 or 5 of them. I don't know if you send multiple times or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I wondered yeah, you mentioned something about that, and I thought, oh my gosh, did he get all of those that were not? It had an extra A in there, and it wasn't in any place close to the key. I mean, when I put your name in the key close to the A that thereby. So, and then it looked like Satan finally just gave up and let the address be corrected in my contact list because I didn't correct it. The first guy at Apple didn't correct it. And the second guy come along and he said, well, I haven't done anything. So anyway, that's that. I'm sure everybody here listening
Glad it ended well.
didn't pay to have something totally doesn't apply to today. But I've started, I don't know how many times to send you a thank you, and all the crazy things going on here in our town has kept me so busy. We have a bat flying around in our sanctuary right now. And and it triggered an alarm. It triggered the alarm, and it sent the policeman to our church. And I'm sure we'll get a letter from the police department with a bill on it because none of us was able to catch that that message that came to us. It was late at night, and so he's still in there somewhere, and we can't turn our alarm on, so that's the way it goes. Anyway, that's life at home. But I want to thank you. Your book is great. I'm so happy to have it. So
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.
And David, I just found your email in my junk folder. So yeah, I'll respond to that tomorrow.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron. Monty, go ahead, please.
I wouldn't worry about it too much, Ron. Most people think we're kind of batty anyway. I wanted to just to express my appreciation. I always feel humbled and blessed by the fact that folks that have taken so much more time than I've ever devoted to study have taken each of these individual areas of study and worked with them long enough and hard enough that they have developed some either opinions or what they believe to be truth out of what they've read and are able to share them with us, because it adds a whole new dimension to it for me. I'm the kind of person that I believe the Book of Mormon because the Spirit told me that it was scriptural, and I've never not believed. So that's just kind of oversimplification, but to hear the grounding that you folks have provided us with all of these different disciplines that you brought to us online here is just amazing and very, very appreciated. I'll let you go now, and once again, I seek nothing but God's blessing on all of you.
Thank you, Monty.
Monty.
I would call people's attention to the chats where Ron Smith has emphasized that the genus Boswellia, which is called frankincense, was used in biblical times, and There's several evidences of it in the Middle American region. And myrrh, he says, the resin from plants of the genus Communifera Bucersaceae are native primarily to tropical America. A few species occur in Africa and Asia. So the idea that he's able to come up with specifics to support his claim is in the chats. I would like to put a question to David Ferriman, and actually it could probably go to everyone because I've been working with David Hall, putting together a resolution for the Community of Christ for the next conference, which would ask for the development of a volunteer committee of qualified people to compile and abridge God's word to the modern world. And David, and you're in a uniquely qualified position to help with that. And I'm wondering if I could squeeze you for an immediate response. What would you highlight as God's word to the modern world?
Just sitting in the hallway.
I would say that what qualifies as God's word is
Hang on. What's the problem?
it's going to be the Bible. It's going to be the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
But for me,
Take a
and
minute.
it's going to be prophetic word of the modern revelations. But for me, it doesn't become God's word until the Spirit explains to us how it's relevant to us in our journey. Otherwise, you have people like detractors who just take random Bible and Book of Mormon verses completely out of context, and they don't make any sense. I think if Community of Christ is going to put something together, I think it's going to be a little difficult on the Bible front because you guys don't own your Bible. Someone else has the copyright to the main one you guys use. The Book of Mormon is absolutely necessary. Doctrine and Covenants is. And I think that you guys, as Community of Christ, need to get the prophetic word out from your first presidency in clear messages in a way that's easy to find and easy to digest. So sorry if that was too long, but that would be my initial thoughts off the top of my head.
Thank you for that. I would urge you to consider, should the proposal be approved, I think you would be a good person to have on that committee.
I would be happy to help. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
James has his hand up. Go ahead, please, James.
Yeah, I just thought of something, Paul. You'd ask that question, what do all these presentations have in common? And it hit me. And it maybe is not what would be immediately obvious. It's probably more based on my experience. I don't know really any of you people here, nor you me, but I suspect a lot of you either grew up in the church or some restoration background. I didn't. I was a convert. I grew up Catholic, which meant I went to Catholic schools for 12 years and never opened the Bible once. So when I was converted, I was 24 years old, I think. And this was in New Orleans. And we had Neil Simmons down there at the time. I don't know if you have any guys knew Neil. Yes, I'm sure some of you did. Your book. He became a mentor and a spiritual father to me. And this was what it took me all of 15 minutes to realize this is the guy I'm going to for questions, because I had a bunch and I spent many an hour bending Neil's ear. But there was something different, and this is what I'm getting to. Other people talked about the Book of Mormon or studying, but when he and his families or close associates would talk about it, it was like they had been there. It was like this was family to them. And I had never experienced anything like that in my life, nor did I know such a thing was even possible. And, it was a testament to the fact that, they had really just, their lives were devoted in large part to that book and the ministry related to the Book of Mormon. So that's what I'm seeing in common here is, there's a lot of heavy duty interest, in some cases, years of research or just a lot of study and a lot of passion about the Book of Mormon. And it shows to me that, that comes through. And that is ministry, that has power. It has the power to get people's attention and the Book of Mormon and the Spirit of God is perfectly capable of doing its own convincing. I don't have to sell it per se, like I'm selling you a used car or something. It has its own convincing power, but I think you kind of have to work at it. But that's what I've seen in common with these presentations. And the one was it, I did not attend the Trial of Jesus one by Newell Wright. But when Newell gave his summary, I immediately pulled up that little spreadsheet so I could go to the link. Because as soon as I get off, I want to hear his presentation.
Right.
Because that one really, I'm intrigued in that for a number of reasons. But it sounds like that there's a lot of parallels there, as he obviously brought out. So it's just a good example of what I'm talking about.
Neil Simmons gave a couple of presentations on the forum before he passed. And one of those was on the Loumiet curse. And I don't have the date in front of me, but I think that one got recorded and is in the YouTube list. I would also point out to you, since you raised his name, that he and Frank Fry were good friends. Frank Fry and I hitchhiked together to Mexico to go to school back in 1967, 68. And we spent a good part of that year with Neil Simmons's parents, Wayne and Verneel Simmons. And so can identify very well with what you're saying about people who were so immersed in the Book of Mormon, they virtually lived it. To go with Verneel to the sessions at the National Museum and be able to sit in with people like Michael Coe and Johansson, and they had top of the world speakers, Chan and Degas, all kinds of fascinating people that we got to hear and meet, and just really a privilege to be in the company of people like that who were sufficiently immersed in the Book of Mormon that they were identifying with it personally.
Yeah, it was my first, it taught me how to think about scripture. I never had that growing up because I just didn't grow up that way. And I thank the Lord that I had that blessing early in my life. And Neil is the most gifted teacher I ever listened to. He can say the most profound things, and yet an 8-year-old child could understand what he was saying. Not everybody can do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ray Treat was another one that offered a lot of good information that way, and he was another in that cadre that I enjoyed.
Amen to that one.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching 10 o'clock, and that's normally time for some of us that have business tomorrow to want to get some shut-eye. But I do appreciate that if you're sitting there with an urgent question or comment, we can still pause for it.
Like, how come it's like down there? Like it's in like that season.
The season. Good night, the Lord is watching o'er you. Good night, his blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night, may God bless you. And thank you all for participating.
Yes.